In this part of the world, it's not unusual to meet an American looking for his long-lost family roots. You try to be helpful, but often there's not a lot to go on at either end. But have you ever wondered what it's like for those people who are looking for their great-great-grandfather Michael Murphy from Letterkenny County? How do they come to here and now? Recently, through the thoughtfulness of Tommy Hegarty of Rushing Killybegs, I met two such Americans. When you hear their story, I think you'll agree that it was remarkable that they even found each other, never mind the family homestead. And the truth is that they found an awful lot more. They're cousins, and their names are Bill Carr and Dave Carr. I started by asking Bill to introduce himself and tell his side of the story.
I'm Bill Carr, 65 years old, and years ago, my aunt, who is a nun, 80 years old, living in New York City, started collecting our family history, newspaper clippings, notes, etc., etc. And then, as you get on in life and you become more interested in these things, I started to go over these and talk to my Aunt Ellie. And we knew that we had come from County Donegal. We knew that we came from a very small townland called Tullyvoo out in Durin Point near Mount Charles. But that was pretty much it. And it took a little bit of going through more notes and more paperwork and meeting people to put together the connection of where my great-great-grandfather lived before he moved to the small townland of Tullyvoo. And that we found, and that was great fun. Near Killybegs is a very small townland called Carr. And in this small townland of Carr, up on a hill, is a farm that Peter Carr, his wife Sarah Boyle Carr, and his son James Carr, up there, he's working the farm, are still there after all these years. And it was great finding them several years ago. That was a lot of fun. And I found them actually with help from John Boyle. John Boyle was the mayor of County Donegal. And of course that's helpful because he knew everybody here. It seems that John knows everybody.
John knows everybody anyway, absolutely.
And so that was a great, fortunate event there. And since then I've been coming back here, well, about every 6 months.
So since then is when? How far back was that?
That would have been probably 2008 or 2007.
So 3-4 years.
Yep. Before that, we used to go visit my wife's family in different areas or where they came from. My wife's grandparents came from the central part of near Athlone and near Galway. So we had a pretty good idea about Ireland.
Okay.
But the interesting thing about County Donegal is not exactly the same as every place else in Ireland.
You reckon that? We reckon that, but everybody, it's not obvious to the friendly outsider.
When I first came here, I thought, this is great. You know, you can really sit back and enjoy the people. And obviously everybody likes to talk here. So now I know why I was born as a talker. And because everybody else talks around here.
Absolutely.
So it's a lot of fun. And of course, the more talking that goes on, the more you learn a little bit. You know, a little piece here, one visit, another little piece here, another visit.
Right.
So that's a lot of, it just kind of all flows together. And now I just come back just to see the people and the land and explore.
So you mentioned your great-great-grandfather?
Yes.
And his name was?
His name was James Carr.
And how did you find out about him exactly?
Well, my great-great-grandfather immigrated during the famine years. 1844-45. He immigrated first to Canada with his wife, and then he stayed there a couple of years. They had 2 children, moved down to Brooklyn, New York, had 2 more children. His wife died. About a year later, he married the woman that I would be related to, and I came from the second family. So that family just kept on going. So we knew pretty well. I mean, he told his children, and they told their children, and they told their children. So we knew that. And
So you knew from James Carr forward.
Yes, we knew
What you
from...
didn't know was who exactly he was here and where he was from and who his people were. Is that right?
We knew that he was from the townland of Tullyvoo, and he told his family that before he moved to Tullyvoo, he lived right near 5 Points, which is an area within spitting distance of Carr. So that's what we knew. We did not know exactly where the piece of land was. We had heard it was Carr, but that's spelled so many different ways.
Uh-huh.
We had a 200-year-old version of the spelling, which really didn't make a lot of sense.
So maybe you weren't actually getting your tongue around it right.
Yeah. So it took John Boyle to put us all together on that one.
Right.
So.
And in terms of your background and his background, what have you learned about the Carr family? They weren't always from these parts, according to what you were telling me.
Well, of course, that's pretty hard. Once you go further back than the late 1700s, we really lose all our records. We weren't born kings and princesses, and there weren't these big scrolls written with gold letters of, how we owned all the land, when in fact we didn't own anything, couldn't read or write.
You're in the majority, don't worry about it.
And probably didn't own a pair of shoes for a long time. But the word of mouth was that we had come over from Scotland around about the time that there was a battle. I think it was the Battle of Culloden or Culloden.
Okay.
Culloden, yes.
Culloden, yeah.
And apparently we might have backed the wrong side. And
Thank you, Bonnie Prince Charles.
This does happen.
those people that backed the wrong side that did survive the day were hunted down.
Right.
And so we only know from word of mouth. There's not an ounce of evidence in this at all that from there he would have come over to County Donegal, maybe through Pettigo.
Right.
It seems to be something, and then from Pettigo kind of moving around here. Mm-hmm. But there's also, again, people thinking that, well, maybe 500 years or so ago we were here and we left and went to go to Scotland to better ourselves there, and then had to turn around because we made a mistaken judgment of who to back. And come back here, So it's now you're back into the mists of time, so to speak.
And talking about the mists of time, I understand that your research to some extent was carried out with DNA.
Yes.
Now, and if I could just park you for a moment, that was where Dave Carr came into it. You began with a DNA search, did you? Or tell me a bit about yourself first. Who are you?
Okay. My name's Dave Carr from Massachusetts, and we are the Carrs of Coleraine, Mass. My ancestral search actually started from a sister and a cousin. My sister, she lives up in Coleraine, Mass, and her daughter were out for a walk one day, and they came across this old graveyard, and she, there's a bunch of old stones in there, so she just kind of goes wandering through as people are wont to do now. And she saw a few Carrs. So she just took some pictures and mailed them to me. This was back before we had digital, And I looked at them and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Kind of threw them in a drawer, didn't think anything more about it. All right. My cousin, who lives in Florida, had one of our other relatives give her a genealogy chart. Well, she made a copy and sent it to me. I looked at it. Oh, that's interesting. Threw it in a drawer. Well,
I could see you were just riveted with this.
I was just riveted with the information. I hadn't gotten bitten by the bug yet, but it wouldn't be too soon before I was.
Right.
My family and I moved to Washington State, and much like here, we get a lot of rain. So over the winter, you're kind of stuck inside. So I'm like, I need a project. I need a hobby. So I said, I've got this huge box full of old photographs that my grandparents gave me and documents and whatnot. Let's get it all organized. Well, that kind of started the research. So as I'm going through this genealogy chart that my cousin gave to me, I'm like, hey, wait a minute. I recognize some of those names. I go to get the pictures that my sister sent to me. What she and I did not realize is she found Henry Carr and his entire family, which is my second great-grandfather, who, come to find out, emigrated from Killybegs, County Donegal. Now, as I'm researching through this, Henry had two sons, Francis, who was my chain, and James, the other chain. as it turns out, as I start finding people, I'm finding that they're all dead. So I was the last male Carr from Henry left alive. Okay. Thinking I was alone in the world, like people do sometimes, I said, well, let me throw my hat in the DNA ring. So I went ahead and ordered the tests, knowing that if I got any kind of hints, it would have to be somebody from before Henry on a different side chain.
Okay.
So I did the tests. I get my swab and I do all that. And then they say, yeah, we'll get to your test in about 3 weeks. I'm like, oh, it's taking too long. So then they send me back and they say, we got 500,000 hits at the 12 marker and like 4 or 5 hits at the 25, and at the 36, 1. William Carr. I'm like, wow.
So what this meant in real terms was that at the time, in real time now,
yeah,
there was one other person who was
there was one other
related
person
to you.
that I knew of in the world that shared my DNA, and I'm like, holy cow. So I emailed Bill, and I'm trying to remember this. No, this is we had left. We were in Germany at the time. That's right. I didn't do the DNA test until we'd moved to Germany.
Right. So you're with the American forces, and
I'm actually retired. My wife is with the American forces.
Okay.
So we currently live in Germany. So I get a hold of Bill, and he starts feeding me information, and at this point I didn't really know where Henry had been born, because some of the earlier U.S. census had him listed as Scotland.
okay.
So half of the census say Scotland, half say Ireland. But still, the family lore had Killarney. They had the K right, but it wasn't Killarney, it was Killybegs. So still not knowing, but at least Bill knew he had lots of information from before, and at least that gave me an area to look at. Well, based on Bill's previous research, he had traced the DNA trail back to Bergen, Norway. So he told me, he said he had this grand idea at 36,000 feet that, hey, let's trace our DNA. We'll meet up in Bergen, Norway, and then we'll hop on over to the Shetlands, down to Orkney. We'll hit the northern coast of Scotland, kind of do a little round robin, and then over to County Donegal, where he was going to introduce me to Peter and Sarah. And I'm like,
Sounds like a great trip.
fantastic idea.
Yeah.
We had plans made. We were going to actually stay in one of the headquarters for Bonnie Prince Charles, which is now up in Culloden, which is now the Culloden House.
Right.
We had reservations at all these wonderful places. Well, Mother Nature stepped in and decided to throw a volcano in our path. So the volcano erupts last year and just ruins all the air traffic in the area.
Right.
Bill can't get out of New York. I can't even get out of Germany. So at this point, I really wanted to get up to Edinburgh and go to the Scotland's People's Centre and see if I could find anything out about Henry.
Right.
So at this point, I'm believing that he was at least born in Edinburgh, or near Edinburgh. So I got this crazy idea, and I looked at my wife and I said, honey, I'm taking the motorcycle to Scotland. She's like, okay.
Everybody wants a wife like that.
Yeah. No, yes.
On a motorcycle like that.
On a motorcycle.
What are you driving?
Harley Davidson.
Oh, yeah.
It's a Heritage Softail.
The
So
entire listenership has just turned green. Go on.
agreed with a little bit of envy. Okay. So I let Bill know, I'm going to go up to Edinburgh. If you can get there, fantastic. I'll meet you. Here's where I'm staying. So I can remember as I'm driving off of the base thinking to myself, this is the craziest thing I have ever done. So I make my way up and I stay with a friend in Lake and Heath in that area for a couple days. Still waiting for Bill to get out, and then finally Bill's like, I'm on the plane. He texted me from his mobile device. I'm like, all right, fantastic. So the next day I head up to the Scotland's People's Centre, and of course, I don't find a single thing. But Bill shows up, we did a quick tour, and at this point, I'm still not sure what I'm going to do with the motorcycle, because we had already had flights from Glasgow going over to County Donegal.
Okay.
So I get on the internet, and I'm like, well, there's a ferry that goes from up here, right over to Northern Ireland.
So to be Stranraer to Larne.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Straight over. And I just told Bill, I said, I'll meet you in County Donegal. And it was easy enough to get my GPS to take me right to the Tara. So I hooked up with some Irish bikers on the ferry.
Naturally.
And they're like, yeah, we're going to County Donegal. Follow us. We know all the best roads. Rock and roll. So, I mean, there were BMWs, there were Indians, there were all different kinds of motorcycles in there. So I followed them all along, and we hooked up, and the rest, they say, is history. So
here you are.
So now we're just
So
trying
this was last year.
Last year in
Was that the first time you two had actually met in the flesh?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And was that here, or you'd met in Scotland?
Met in Edinburgh.
Met in Edinburgh.
Yep.
Yeah, right. And then came here.
And then came here.
And met Peter and Sarah.
Sarah. And I got to tell you that little story. It was kind of funny. We're sitting at the Tara, and Bill calls up Sarah. He's like, hey, I'm here. And I'm sitting there listening. He's like, yeah, I'm going to come up in a couple of minutes. Okay, bye. Click. Bill, did you forget to mention something? He's like, oh, we'll be fine. He's like, just watch out for the dog.
Dog doesn't take the strangers as much.
Yeah, not too much. So we get up there, and I'm thinking, okay, Bill's going to walk in, and they're going to look at me and go, oh, another cousin. Oh, and how did you meet, by the way? But
it's not like that, no.
Peter and Sarah and the dog welcomed me with open arms.
Brilliant.
And it's kind of funny. The dog doesn't bark when Bill and I show up.
Excellent. I think dogs are sensitive to DNA.
He must know. Of course, we feed him rocks, so he's pretty happy with that. But no, so this year I decided to go ahead and do it again, and
fantastic.
So here I am.
So you came over this year directly to Killybegs?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And when did you arrive?
Well, David did a repeat of the motorcycle trip. So David took his motorcycle and finally got here last Thursday,
Right.
and I flew in from New York and arrived in Shannon on Thursday, and just drove up here, made a couple of stops that I like to make.
Yeah.
Arrived here probably within a couple hours of when Dave got here.
So you're staying in the Tara.
Staying at the Tara.
You're meeting John Boyle and Peter and Sarah, and I'm sure there are other connections and friends and cousins and people you have to meet.
We meet more people every single day.
Right.
I asked Bill and Dave what stage their researchers were at now.
Bill's got a pretty good line on what happened to his Carr ancestors, because there were other boys from the chain that he's got a good record of.
Okay.
I have family lore that gives me Henry's parents' names.
Okay, very good.
The only issue is we know that Henry was born in 1833. Most of the records don't go any earlier than about 1845. So I haven't had any luck finding any birth record on him, and I haven't had any luck at all finding a death record on his parents. So they could possibly be from the Russian area.
Okay.
What is the other town that I was talking about?
Mount Charlotte?
The north and east of here.
Well, any of the towns that are in the Glenties electoral district,
right.
Which is, pretty much starts from here.
That's right. Yeah.
Heading west.
Right. It could be Glenties. I just really don't know.
Okay. So if anybody listening has any information,
if anybody out there knows what happened to Henry's parents,
or
Bridget O'Neill or Francis Carr, and they would have been born right around 1800
or before.
Yeah. Right.
Then
good.
Get a hold of the radio station, because they know how to get a hold of me.
Very good. Just then, going back on the DNA side of it, you mentioned Bergen. Talk to me a bit, Bill, about where you think the DNA came from and where it travelled.
Of course, so Dave mentioned how he started with the DNA. And probably close to 10 years ago, pretty much the beginning of this DNA mystery thing, my two sisters and brother, for a birthday present, gave me this DNA kit. And at that time, there weren't a lot of these DNA agencies. It was just a real small one. But this one was out of Cambridge, England, and it was run by a pretty well-known researcher in the DNA field called Brian Sykes. And he has a sideline business of running these DNA tests because he's been tracing people for years and years, mostly, from the British Isles.
Right, sure.
So I sent the swab in. About 5 or 6 weeks later, the answer came back, and of course, I knew what it was going to say. It was going to say that I was descended from, some Celtic tribe someplace along the line. And of course, I just knew this.
Right.
When I opened up the paper, everything on the paper was wrong.
Absolutely.
So the test indicated that I wasn't of Celtic stock, so to speak.
Right. Yeah.
And then I was this other DNA marker that is relatively rare, which is a good thing if you're into DNA because you don't want one of the more popular ones. It was relatively rare. About 10,000 years ago, passed through the Balkans, and that's still where the vast majority of the people with the DNA marker that Dave and I have are in the Balkan state areas.
Okay.
But it passed through there, went up over Europe, a little bit north of the path where a lot of the Celtic people started moving westward.
Right.
When they were moving westward.
Into France and on, yeah.
Right. So stock we were on went north and then went up into Scandinavia, Norway, and Sweden. And that's why I knew these test results just couldn't be right. So I called my 2 sisters and brother and said, well, this was a great idea, but they gave me the wrong results because I know deep down inside, what I must be. And so if they don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and get another test from another organization.
Okay, double check. Second opinion.
Double check this thing. Well, of course, I was sure the first one was wrong. So I send my $100 into this other organization, which by now is becoming very popular, and actually it's the most popular one now, and sent it in and waited very confidently for the results that were going to come back and tell me exactly what I always thought I was.
You're a hard man to convince.
Open up the mail comes, open up the letter. Oh, no, it said the exact same thing as the first one. How could this possibly be?
Can I have my money back?
Yeah, I'm thinking people really don't know much about DNA in this field apparently. Am I going to have to go over there and tell them how to do this? Well, I adapted to it, but that actually, the interesting aspect is it helps to have this so-called rare DNA marker.
Sure.
When I got the DNA results, I allowed them to go public on the internet.
Right.
And that's actually how David found me, because he allowed his results to go public.
Okay.
And then
so
the mainframe computer
matched,
is what puts everything together and does all the matching.
Right.
And you can actually check every day if you're so inclined. I haven't checked for about a year. And even after all these years, there's only, I guess, I'm going to say 3 or 4 other people that have this one particular marker that are as close as your DNA marker and my DNA marker.
Correct.
And interestingly enough, they also have put online that they don't know anything about their ancestry, but they heard they came from County Donegal. So there must be a small area right around here in southwest County Donegal that carries this. But there is a Carr family DNA internet site
Group, right.
But they're all more of the Celtic ones.
All right.
So even most of the Carrs we meet around here are really another branch of the Carrs that would have come from, the Celts as they went across.
Sure.
And then besides all that, this has been a great journey because it actually lets me know that when somebody says they're Irish, it's really a pretty wide open field. You've had the traders have been coming up here.
A lot of people passed through. Yeah.
And all the battles and all the warriors and all the people coming and going. And,
A lot of monks too.
Yes.
Yeah, and so
Before celibacy was invented.
yeah, so there's a lot of everybody
Right.
in us.
Yeah.
I mean, we're really just a giant melting pot of traders that have been coming by the coast for 5,000 years or longer.
But just when you mentioned traders and coming by the coast, how your DNA came from Bergen to here was probably not trading directly as such, not straight off.
Well, the word trading is a broad term. Now that I found out there may be some Viking blood flowing through there, first it's a little, you have to adapt to that. And I'm going to stick with the word trading. And, of course, they may have been trading in some gold that they picked up inappropriately. And they may have been trading in
Don't ask,
some
don't tell.
fine-looking Irish women that they may have adopted inappropriately.
Okay. Well, they definitely were very good traders.
And, and of course, it turns out they were the ones who built up, as I understand it, most of the cities along the coast. Dublin.
Native Irish weren't a city-living people at
Right.
all. Dublin was a Viking settlement.
Yeah.
Waterford, Drogheda, all the river mouth.
Yeah, especially like Waterford, Ford, so we could understand all that.
So just to wrap things up a bit, from this very varied past and long journeys in time and space, where to from here? What are you going to do now that you've found your long lost relatives? And
Well,
whatever?
finding the relatives was the interesting aspect, and that, of course, was the first thing. But now, each time I come here, if you meet friends, it's not so much about relatives anymore. It's more of the people you meet here.
Okay.
And so when I come here, you meet new people, and it's just pretty much that. So, of course, then I have to bring my own brother and two sisters over and just kind of show them some of these areas and stuff like that. But basically, I just like to keep coming here about every 6 months and learn more and more about the older southwest area of Donegal.
Right.
By that I mean a couple thousand years old or something. And visiting all the churches, and I don't really care if it's a Catholic church or a Protestant church. Being a Yank, there's no difference from me.
Well, even there, that can be confusing because when this area was planted, the Catholic churches were taken over by the Protestants. So before they started building their own churches, the Protestant churches were the Catholic churches. So but that's all in the past. What about you, Dave? Were you coming back again, or have you had enough of it?
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of like Bill says. At this point, I've probably gotten about as much information as I'm going to be able to get, just because there are no records to be had. But what I can do is I can round out the information. Okay. Right. There's a book that I read not too long ago called the Famine Ships, and I wanted to kind of experience as much as I can through books what the journey would have been like for Henry coming from, this area over to the States. So in addition to that, now I can go out onto the peninsulas or around here, see the buildings that they used to inhabit, and kind of get an idea of, we were way out on the point. There's no way that you're going to farm that. There's just too many rocks. But the areas that we found that could have been the Carr family plot, the lower end down by the water, it's all flat. It's all been plowed up, so they very well, most likely, were farmers. Right. So, as I said, now it's just a matter of rounding out the information and learning what you can about history and making sure that that's not forgotten by future generations, which is the most important thing.
Well, I think you've done a very good job of that. Bill, you've actually written a book.
It's a small booklet that I decided after a journey here in 2009. I spent about a week here by myself, and then went on to meet my wife in Dublin. And I thought, well, a lot of things happened during that 5 or 6 days. I just have to sit down. I spent a couple of weeks in the summertime going over it and putting it all together in a little booklet, which it's online, and also there's a copy of it down at the Killybegs Visitors Center, that little booth down there.
This is the information center on the shore road.
Yeah. And it's, if anybody wants to try and find it on the internet, it's pretty easy if you just Google Donegal Notes and then plus my name, Bill Carr. So if you do Donegal Notes plus Bill Carr, this is usually the first thing that comes up. It'll be the first or second or third, and then you can it'll go to it and you can read the whole 58-page set of pictures and notes and everything. And that's
excellent. And if anybody has anything that they want to add to your story or tell you about, or how to make extra researches in relation to your roots or whatever, they can people email you through that site?
No, they can't, but they can easily email me at my own personal email, which is pretty easy to remember. It's Bill Carr, BILLCARR, at GetBalanced, GetBalanced.com.
Very
It's,
good. Bill Carr at getbalanced.com.
Yep.
And my email address is
Yep.
easy. It's dcar61@gmail.com. Love to hear from you.
Very good. Bill and Dave, on your fabulous journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Great.
sir.
Thank you, Tony.